part 2 of this one-part series, we looked at Christian apologist William Lane Craig's new book, In Quest of the Historical Adam, a biblical and scientific exploration. Craig claims that Adam and Eve were indeed historical figures, but that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are mythohistory, or proto-history, and should not be taken literalistically. Craig proposes that Adam and Eve existed outside the biblical narrative some 750,000 to 1 million years ago in the form of Homo heidelbergensis. Moving on with our discussion, we need to look at all of the pieces of Christian theology which are thrown under the bus by Craig's narrative, including but not limited to the following: the supernatural narrative of the universe's origin, the supernatural creation of plants and animals, the supernatural origin of modern humans, the supernatural creation of biological males and females, the supernatural origin of sin and death, which theologically leads to the origin of man's need for supernatural redemption in the form of a dying, resurrecting God-man, Jesus. In his interview with Sean McDowell, Craig says that Adam and Eve had to be historical figures because the New Testament apostle Paul spoke of Adam, in particular, as having actual effects in the real world, something which can't be done by a merely literary figure. Take a listen.
Very simply, because a literary figure cannot have effects outside of the literature in which that figure appears. The person Hamlet in the play by Shakespeare was supposed to be a Danish prince who actually lived, but there was no such person as Hamlet. So Hamlet can't have any sort of effects outside the play. But what Paul asserts about Adam is that through Adam, sin came into the world, and because of Adam's sin, all men died, and sin reigned from Adam to Moses, a historical period of time, and we're still dealing with it today, says Paul. And so it seems to me that because of the extra literary effects of this figure cannot be purely literary, but must be historical.
Well, I mean, why didn't you just say so, Bill? If Paul said it, it must be true. I mean, scientifically speaking, Paul couldn't possibly have been, simply mistaken about the first 11 chapters of Genesis, reading them as literal when they were clearly anything but. I mean, he couldn't possibly have based an entire theology on a bunch of mythic nonsense, right? Obviously not. And what exactly are these so-called historical effects of this historical figure, Adam? The effects we can see here in the actual world as opposed to the merely literary effects of a merely literary figure? Well, they are death and sin. As Craig puts it, through Adam, sin came into the world. And because of Adam's sin, all men died. Of course, to show these effects, you would have to show that death was a new thing for Homo heidelbergensis. Sin too, neither of which can be demonstrated. On the contrary, biological organisms have been dying on this planet in an unbroken chain of death for as long as life forms have existed on Earth, billions of years. And both Homo erectus and Homo ergaster, two hominid species which predate Homo heidelbergensis, are known to have eaten fruit, wear linen and wool together, and spill their seed on the ground when impregnating their dead brothers' wives, though not necessarily with Onan's consistency. Of course not. Craig's theory is really nothing more than a disingenuous attempt to fit the square peg of his Christian theology into the round hole of our observational sciences. But the cherry-picking required calls into question both the supernatural power of God Almighty and the need for any supernatural redemption. God can't make a talking snake because he can only make talking donkeys? According to Craig, one of those is beyond belief. #TalkingSerpentPhobe. If God really is all-powerful, he could of course make a talking snake, walk around an arboretum like any other corporeal being, audibly calling out to the newly created Adam and Eve, and plant trees the fruit of which can impart immortality and the knowledge of good and evil. Once you've bought into the idea of the supernatural and an all-powerful superbeing, nothing can be taken off the table. With God, all things are possible. And here we see the oxymoronic nature of Craig's entire philosophy, the idea of a reasonable faith. A God whose work is beyond our comprehension has no need or business being reasonable, condescending to what mere humans can reasonably grasp with our tiny little brains. To suggest that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are merely figurative mytho-history, while talking donkeys and dying resurrecting God-men are real, is to self-servingly segment incredulity beyond all recognition. Bill wants to have his faith and eat it too. But in doing so, all the new dots he connects on the rational side disconnect the dots that make his theology necessary and relevant. This is why Old Testament scholar Dr. John Oswald says Craig is giving away the store. I'd put it another way. To me, Craig has officially become the Toto of Christian apologetics, pulling back the curtain and showing us all that the magician isn't so magical after all. Once again, I'm me. Thanks for watching.